I would argue, M365 from a positive perspective and an attack vector perspective is probably the most important thing in the purview of MSPs these days. Is that?
Absolutely, 100%. Like, it's not even funny anymore how much is around the identity this time. Like the last cyber call I was on, I think 2-3 weeks ago, I was on my soapbox again, saying that the identity is the new edge. Stop
Mhm.
protecting your local network and that kind of stuff. Focus on the identity, which is so much more important these days. So yeah, absolutely, both positive and negative.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's in both ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's cool is, Ben, as I go over to you, for 2 years now, you went to the dark side, but you were, you were in an MSP for a number of years as a director of security, and have in what SaaS Alerts does is focuses really strongly on identity and SaaS applications. What in the last few years, as you left the business as an MSP, have you just seen the velocity of
Oh yeah.
attacks? And what could you maybe just high level sum up what you see over the past few years and the kind of the changes?
Yeah, it's really snowballed. I think when we were just getting into SaaS alerts, token theft really wasn't a big thing, and that's just really evolved and become such a big problem for pretty much the entire SaaS community. When you can replicate pretty much any website and steal someone's token, it's definitely frightening. I think when I was at my MSP, it was a lot of social engineering, and token theft was just starting to take off. But since then, there's been so many different varieties of a way to steal your token that it's sometimes hard to keep up with all the different tactics they're using.
Right. And Lewis, over to you, who also like 3-time MSP, Microsoft MVP. But it's not just Microsoft. It's as Ben's alluding to. We just had this big sales loft drift, OAuth
Yep.
based. It's threat actors are looking for mechanisms to easily just jump in and take the identity. Fair, and what maybe some thoughts you might have on what we've started to talk about thus far.
Yeah, I think MSPs have got a challenge with adapting to the new way of working. We say the new way, we kind of mean cloud native. The controls are all at their fingertips in Entra, and there's lots of different levels of Microsoft licensing you can get that cover all these bases. I think what we're seeing industry-wide, globally, and in different regions in who we speak to, is that once the MSP realizes that you get greater control and granularity with Entra IDP1, and you can do full conditional access, they're able to mitigate a lot of these problems. So your attacker in the middle kind of stuff is mitigated by most often requiring the compliant device. So
Yeah.
even when that session is replayed on the attacker's device, they can't log in anyway.
Yeah. That was a big win, right, Lewis? We
Yeah.
had Kelvin on the P1 licensing, right, Kelvin? That was probably one of the biggest wins we've seen in a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft was very like I said during that session. I spoke to the identity team about, hey, why wasn't this already in P1? And it was mostly just like, okay, we want to make sure it works first, and then we'll put it in the lowest subscriptions, because they just had a bit of uncertainty. But now with token replay protection, continuous access evaluation, and of course compliant devices, you can almost certainly protect yourself against attack in the middle type of attacks. I'm saying almost because there will still always be stupid users. I mean, I'm one of them. There will always be a user that finds a way around it to give their credentials to someone.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It will happen.
Very fair. All right, let me get on into it here. I'll set the stage, do some intros, and as I kind of look down. So first off, Andrew Morgan, the host of the Cyber Call, founder of Write a Boom. And as I said, I wanted to get a group of what I think are some of the best in the business at all things around M365 and play differently a little bit in the ecosystem, if you will. So, the backdrop, right? So we're living in this age where configuration drift, token hijacking, social engineering are really, this is the common, day in and day out world that in which we live. At the same time, Kelvin, we said the good things are happening, right? Without the Microsoft ecosystem, we don't really exist, right? For right or wrong, it is what it is. Some really cool things are happening, right? We're seeing, things like we just talked about around, conditional access and P1, opportunities with Copilot and seeing where things may take us down that whole genre. But with it, with opportunity, leads also more attack vectors, more stewardship around data, configuration, etc. So in order to tackle this monolithic and always fun topic, I wanted to bring, starting off with you, Kelvin, if you could give a quick intro of yourself and what you do there at both Lime and Cyberdrain.
I love doing this. I love talking about myself.
Yeah.
I am an MSP owner. That is my primary business. I love being an MSP owner. We have grown very rapidly, 20% year on year over the past couple of years. So with that growth came a lot of challenges. One of the challenges was, how the hell do we manage M365? And back when I started CIPP, there was no good solution for it. So a little bit out of spite, I started developing a piece of software that I dubbed the Cyberdrain Improved Partner Portal. And from there on, it just exploded. 100 users in the first month to, I want to say, almost 10,000 now. I think somewhere around the 10,000 mark, a little bit less, probably like 400 less or so. So yeah, it's been an absolute journey. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, 6 times Microsoft MVP, and something that I haven't been able to publicly say a lot yet. Lewis, you already know this, but I recently received the title of Microsoft Regional Director.
Nice.
Which is a step above or a sidestep from the MVP program, where you're able to communicate directly with the board at Microsoft about technical issues, about what you see the space doing, and these kind of things. It's an amazing opportunity.
That's awesome. So you're saying you'll get Satya to come to write a boom with you?
I can try. I can sure as hell try, but no promises there.
Thanks for the intro, Kelvin. Lewis, no stranger to the MSP world either, Microsoft MVP. If you could enlighten us a little bit about yourself, and again, welcome and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I guess so. I started off in internal IT departments, and then I went to an MSP, and then I tried to start my own MSP, and I failed and gave up. And then I worked for 2 more MSPs, and then I decided, actually, I like doing Microsoft config and delivering that message to people that if you get that right, you are preventing nearly every breach, was something that I really enjoyed doing and delivering. And when I found a company like Inforcer, and they said that's all we do, we help people maximize their existing capabilities, I was like, yeah, sign me up, let's go. And so that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, and not only Microsoft MVP, Lewis, though, also an instructor, correct?
Some people might call me that. I've not officially been called instructor. I'm not an MCT yet. No, we have someone internally, Graham Morrison, on our side who is that.
Also an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot more effort to be an MCT than MVP, I believe.
Okay. Well, we're going to have you and Graham, though, doing Intune training at Write a Boom. And my understanding is you walk out with you walk out with a certificate to go take the MD 102. So that's,
yes, I mean, I probably should get MD 102 before that session.
That would be good.
That might be a good time. That might be a good time, Lewis.
Fair enough. And then we got Ben Jones. Ben, awesome to have you with us, bud. Thanks for being such a great friend and partner over the years. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm the only non-Microsoft MVP here. I'm gonna have to work on that. But
Give it a year, Ben. Give it a year.
I'll get there. But I started out running my own kind of a break fix shop for about 11 years. It was before they could call it an MSP, and then I was purchased by an MSP. Decided I didn't like it. Did the whole private IT department kind of thing, and then joined an MSP, Central Technology Solutions, who was a consumer of SaaS Alerts, fell in love with the product, and I figured I could do a lot more good for a lot more people working for a vendor. So that's where I am.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of awesome stuff, Ben. You do the Managed SaaS Alerts over there and grown that phenomenally well. So love what you're doing, and you're going to be doing an admin course. And I forgot, Kelvin, you're doing the first CIPP.
Doing the first CIPP certification at Right of Boom.
There's some conflicts there. There's a lot of people that want to go to both of ours. So I told Andrew, I said, I'll be happy to move my time, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna have to figure this out. In one way, shape, or form, we're gonna have a conflict because we got Lewis's session, your session, and your session.
There's always going to be an issue in where you go. It's a conference thing.
Yep.
All right, let's get on into it. So, Kelvin, let me start off with you. So you mentioned CIPP. Take us back to the this evolution. What were the I think when you and I met, I could be wrong, Kelvin, but Lime, I think you were 15 employees.
I think so, something like that.
And what are you now?
I want to say that. I want to say it right, 80-ish.
Yeah.
80 FTE. But like we have some people that are part-time, we have some people that are full-time, and we're doing mergers acquisition. So it's a bit up there right now. Even for me as the CTO, it's I sometimes have to just I actually have an anecdote about that. I was walking around my office a while back, and I was like, "Is that an employee or is that a client?"
I was gonna say, reminds me of the Caddyshack. Is that's your kid? You didn't realize that's your some of the here, right?
Yeah, it's been wild, but one of the biggest struggles we had when we started CIPP was how the hell are you going to manage? Back then, it was only like 200 tenants, and now we're in the 1,000 range. How are you going to manage 200 tenants and keep them in the same state over time? It back then it seemed impossible. I was creating PowerShell scripts, and everyone was. A lot of MSPs were happily using those PowerShell scripts, but that is a mess to maintain over time. And what if your best PowerShell scripter leaves tomorrow? That would have been a shock to the organization. So we started trying to find other solutions. It really was out of a need, a necessity that we saw. Like, okay, we need to start creating something. Or I personally said, I need to start creating something for this because otherwise, how the hell are we going to manage all of this?
Two questions for you. Why open source, and when did you know you were on to something? Like, hey, beyond just, hey, I'm going to do this because over the years, a lot of MSPs, hey, this is a great idea. I'm going to take this to market, right? We've had numerous and some successful, but what was it that made you think, man, there's something here? And with 10,000 MSPs, you could be making a lot of money. Why did you decide to go open source?
Well, we're still making a lot of money, so that's a good thing.
I meant, you could monetize this a lot further.
Of course, yes. The primary reason I decided to go open source was because of the way I developed this. Like I said, it was SPI-driven development. CIPP started as a product purely driven out of, hey, if you're not going to do it, and you would be the big vendors, the Kaseya's, the ConnectWise, they weren't focused on it back then. They were still very focused on the endpoint. So if they weren't going to do it, I was going to do it myself. And that was the little bit of SPI-driven development. And I involved people from the community. Gavin Stone, a former board member of MSP Geek and a very well-known entity in the community. Some other people, Steven at Ninja One, I involved them all in the development process early on. So it would seem very unfair if I'd suddenly go like, oh yeah, you've put effort into this and now I'm going to monetize it. So I always wanted it to be as community involved as possible, because that's also a part of my identity. I mean, Cyberdrain existed long before that, where I was trying to share everything I could with the community. So that's the reason for open source.
I have to say, very unmarked Zuckerberg of you, not taking
Very unmarked Zuckerberg of me. Yeah,
I know he
yeah.
still reads your WhatsApp messages, Kelvin.
I sometimes read my WhatsApp messages. Sometimes.
Um,
Um,
no, so sorry, I interrupted you, Brad.
but
But
yeah, the moment I knew I was onto something was the first couple of weeks. I released it out into the wild. First, it started with like 5 people in MSP Geek saying, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And back then, you have to remember, I'm not a developer by trade. I'm a PowerShell scripter at best. That's not a developer. So it was Yankee HTML combined together with a front end and function apps. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't what it is today. Um, I published it in MSP Geek, and some people picked it up, and it snowballed from there so much that was the moment I was like, "Yeah, this is amazing.
got it.
This is something that the entire industry needs."
Got it. So just a follow up. What are the most overlooked? If you were to, if you had a group of MSPs in the room, what when you first get them on, or you're looking at, if you were to look at their tenants, what's the most? They're not using a CIPP, they're not using Inforcer or SaaS. What are the most overlooked things that you see in
So
big and
I 100% I'm convinced that it doesn't matter what product you use as long as you use one of the products. I don't give a damn really about which one you use as long as you do it, because the default that Microsoft comes with is Microsoft has a balance, and they have tipped that balance to collaboration instead of security. So the default is that a tenant is set up for collaboration.
right?
And so the biggest issue that I see is that people are accepting the defaults. They are going like, okay, you know what? I've created a Microsoft tenant. I am done. Not understanding that you're putting your business at so much risk because it's set up for collaboration instead of security. So that's definitely the biggest thing that I see. It's the collaboration settings, allowing guests to view your entire directory, settings such that's actually a default. By default, a guest that you invite into your M365 environment can see all your configuration, can see all your users, can see the descriptions you have inside of your Active Direct or your Azure Active Directory, your Entra. They can see your conditional access configuration. It's mind blowing how much access a guest gets when they join, and that's just because Microsoft was like, yeah, it has to behave like old Active Directory, and it has to be collaborative.
Right.
And
So let me just, Ben, just kind of just quick to that. Is that why you're seeing things like, we talk a lot about Black Hills, Bo, John over there? Is that why they're setting up often teams as one of their initial ways in which to get into an environment? And then once they do, why enumerate with things like Graph Runner? Can you just talk a little bit about what an attacker might do collaboratively with what Kelvin just shared?
Yeah, just like Kelvin said, it's the guest account privileges. It's just insane. I ran across a PowerShell script you can run. It enumerated the entire directory. So as a threat actor, all I have to do is gain access to that information. That's valuable information. I know who your HR department is. I know who the CEO is. I know who to actually go off after an attack. And then when if I gain access to your teams, I know exactly who to talk to. I know, how to approach that person.
Got it. Can you just speak? I know I didn't prep you on this, but can you talk a little about Graph Runner? What is it? What a threat? How does Bo use that, and what would you do maybe to prevent something like that happening? If there are other ways.
That's a tough one. I ran across one program. I think maybe it was at DEF CON. Basically, he made this program that you could device code attack an environment and then run Graph Runner and pretty much just like Kelvin said, pull conditional access policies. I saw no networks. I saw users. I saw pretty much everything. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And it's really, I think it comes down to configuration management. If you don't need a particular feature in Microsoft, then why do you have it turned on? Why not just go ahead and cut that off, turn on. I don't think I've ever legitimately used like device codes for Microsoft. but by default it's on. Just like by default you can sign into a shared mailbox. By default you can enumerate an entire tenant with a guest account.
Right. So Lewis, before I ask you your question, we got defaults like direct special, direct send, which is it a feature or is it a bug? And it's being used right now as certainly an attack vector. But what are your thoughts so far on this and on the config or policy side? What are things that you see and go kind of cringe at, and would be areas you'd
tenant reviews, whenever I get those projects, have always been some of my favorite projects to do, because you have these companies that are household names. They are big companies, they are small companies, they're mom and pops, they're managed by an MSP. You finally get the access to the tenant, so you get global reader and you start your work. First of all, you try and pick holes in conditional access. That is the foundation of all tenant security. Hopefully, you find out they've actually got conditional access and they've not just got security defaults switched off because it's an old tenant. But let's assume that this tenant has got conditional access. I'm now looking to see, does MFA apply to all users? Is it applied to a static group? Is that static group updated? Is the office a trusted location? And is the office excluded from MFA? Which I see a lot. Often when you ask people why they do that, they don't really know. They kind of go, oh, I don't know. MFA prompts, too many of them.
Oh my God.
I'm looking if we've got the required compliant devices. I'm looking if we are blocking unsupported OS types, because there's a known list to enter, there's an unknown list to enter, and if you don't block the unknown ones, they could somehow log into the tenant. So there's a lot to be looked at in Entra, and then there's much more to talk about there, like who can enroll a device, the settings, who is a local admin on a device in device settings in Entra. Then I move across to Intune. Let's have a look at this. Have we got any platform restrictions in place? Can anybody enroll a personal device into that tenant? That is another attack vector for somebody. I'm looking at BitLocker. I'm looking at Windows updates. Have we got clashes? Have we got rings that don't work? Have we got silly deadline settings? Have we got silly PowerShell scripts that are making local admins? There's so many things that you can check in a tenant, and you just end up building this huge laundry list of why are you doing all of these things? And the answer to the company that you're doing that review from or for can vary quite a lot. It's often political, it's often lack of knowledge, it's often lack of confidence, and IT people struggle to ask for help. So when they do get the time with an expert, they can kind of open up and be a bit vulnerable, and that's how they make things better. But yeah, the amount of default things that a tenant has that's bad is a lot. But I think the most dangerous example is when you've got, I think default is better than an admin that knows just enough to be dangerous. And often they're the ones that have basically put the company at risk. I don't know what else you guys see when you bring on MSP clients and you look at these configs and go, wow, okay.
Interesting. Kelvin, there was a question about conditional access in P1. Did you see that? And
why it requires a license, because Microsoft also needs to make money, and they bundled too many features into P1. But I am going to say something that Lewis absolutely loves. As an MSP, the only thing that you should consider as a valid SKU is business premium, period.
Yeah, it's not a license, it's a lifestyle.
Exactly.
Can you give us some context on that, Kelvin, the why behind it?
There's so much value in the business premium SKU, and Lewis can explain this much better than I can, because he's completely into this. Like, he's been telling me this for years, and I'm just copying him in this case. But like business premium just contains so much value for any small business. It's not just MSPs; it's any small business, really.
Yeah. Anything you'd want to kind of dovetail, Lewis, of the why?
I realized this a couple of years ago when I worked at an MSP for the first time, and what I tried to do from that point, and some would call this a path of misery and torture, but for whatever reason, I did this thing where we had business premium or the customer has business premium, and every business problem that came up, I would try and solve it using only the tools inside business premium. And it turns out that lots of the left of boom can be prevented if you just get your config right. And that is the message. If you listen to anything from this talk today, go and get your config right, because it saves all the pain on the right of boom.
Interesting. Meaning, even, is it even, Lewis, logging and things of that nature, getting things that if you do have a right of boom incident, you are on right of boom, being able to look at critical information that, could give you key, clues to what.
Yeah, I mean, if we look more into logging, we kind of, I think we start to go down the path of like traditional cybersecurity management, which again is still so focused on the endpoint itself and what the AV and the EDR is doing. To me, the EDR is like step 5 in the chain. That is your absolute last resort safety net if it's kicking in and doing stuff, because there's all this preventative stuff I can do. The example I often run through with customers is, let's say that there's some user at your client who wants to convert a PDF or a Word to PDF. The first thing they do is they Google that and they find an application. Well, step 1, they should have asked the IT admin, how do I do this? And that would have solved the problem. Step 2 is they found themselves on this dodgy site. So why was Smart Screen not turned on? Then they download the file. Why was potentially unwanted apps not turned on? Then the app is on their device, and this is where EDR could kick in. But then they might double click that exe and run it, and if they're local admin, they can run and execute that file. So why were they local admin? And for the really high maturity MSPs, why was application control not enforced? So if it's not on this list, it does not run. Now, application control is very, very difficult to do in one business, let alone as an MSP. So I wouldn't expect to see that. But if you want the answers, they are in business premium. You just got to work harder.
Got it. Ben, we so far we've been talking about, managing and, looking at clients, but what about, when you were director of security for your MSP, what about the staff? Like, how do you keep them kind of in line for SOPs that are your best practices? How challenging is that for the MSP themselves? Like, this is our way of doing things, and making sure everybody is marching in lockstep, or when you're dealing with tens, hundreds, thousands of customers.
That's why I think like software like ThreatLocker has been so successful, is the ability to lock those machines down. Because you're right, a user, they're going to find a way to give you a bad day sometimes. And I think, like Lewis said, a lot of the end users aren't reaching out to these MSPs and saying, hey, I need help with this, or the IT department. They're always afraid, hey, I'm bugging this guy. I don't want to get in his way. I know he's super busy, but I've always said, please bug me, because I would much rather you bother me for like 5 minutes than for me to spend, hours of my day trying to clean up the mess from your computer getting, a bunch of malware or encryption or something like that. So yeah, I think honestly, you really have to you have to lock it down. You can't give them the option.
Yeah. I got a question, maybe starting with you, Ben, and I'd like to go around the horn. I didn't think about this until just now because what you said. Let's talk about, an event versus becoming an incident versus potentially a breach, but this kind of continuum. If we had a breach attorney on an incident response firm, they'd say, hey, basically, as soon as you see something, throw it over the fence, right? Let us get involved. How do you dance these days when so much of our lives, are around Microsoft events and incidents that could turn into a breach of some type? But when can you fix it internally, quote unquote? And when do you feel confident these days fixing it internally versus, man, we probably better preserve some evidence here. We probably better, get insurance involved, breach firm, etc. Like, what's that dichotomy these days?
I don't think any MSP or company wants to to say the incident word. I think when I was at my MSP, it's always be very careful about the words that you use, because they have certain implications. And yeah, I think that's why a lot of those incidents go unreported as well, is they don't want the stigma that comes along with it. But as far as, I'm with Lewis. You build up your defenses. Going through logs should be kind of like the last thing that you're doing. If you're building up your walls around your castle, you don't have to worry about what they're doing once they get inside.
But let me just, maybe I'm not doing a good job asking, but then like these days, like you might you'll see a token hijacking.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are very successful at seeing them, shutting down, locking accounts, kicking people out, and the MSP moves on with their day. When does the line get crossed? Do you feel like, hey, you probably need to involve others, versus, hey, we got them out successfully? What can you give an example where you might say this probably needs to get some others involved?
I think it's volume, really. Volume, and perhaps the what was the title of the employee that was attacked? Was it a lower level new employee that just joined, that opened up the wrong email or something, versus like the CEO? I think that's, and we also ran into one incident not too long ago where we had a responder that was kicking off repeatedly, and the client reached out that this is extremely noisy. Can we turn this off? And come to find out, it was somebody that was phished, and they forwarded it to their friend, who said, "Is this legit?" And, "Oh, I don't know. Let me forward it over to this guy." And so before you know it, we had a whole bunch of people clicking on that same email.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of this is noisy. It's you're under a massive attack. So and that's when it really comes down to, hey, there's a serious issue.
Yeah. Kelvin, how about you? Any thoughts on this? Because we're dealing with so many Microsoft incidents these days, especially a company like yours has got potentially 1,000 tenants. That's a lot of alerts on a daily basis. I gotta believe.
Absolutely. It's funny because Ben's thing just reminded me of the quote that no matter how idiot-proof you make a system, there will always be a better idiot. That absolutely is 100% applicable, because we have a lot of monitoring, we have a lot of alerting, and then once in a while we get a call from a user saying, hey, I got 50 different error messages on my computer at work, so I tried doing it on my computer at home and I didn't get the error messages there. Is that a problem? And I started getting very frustrated at hearing about these incidents. My security team reports incidents to me, and especially the stupid shit like this. They come up to me and go like, "Yeah, this and this happened." I'm like, "Okay, yeah. How are we ever going to defend against this?"
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the biggest thing that we notice in all the things that we monitor. It's actually user education is quite possibly one of the hardest things to get right, but one of the most effective things when it finally does work.
Yeah,
got it. Lewis, how about you on baseline, secure baselines and policies that you're doing? Are they when you get a big MSP, is it quote unquote the same across the board, or do you see different things for different industries, different policies, or is it, hey, this should be the standard across the board? What's your take and what's your recommendation?
That's a good point you made about different industries and recommendations. I think sometimes people get confused at the concept of security, and the reminder is that security fundamentals are the same for every business. So your baseline for the one person machine shop for how they access data is in theory exactly the same for the 250 people 1,000 seat companies. That is something you can standardize, and that is something that those standards are shared across multiple frameworks. So NIST, CIS, and all these other frameworks, Cyber Essentials in the UK, and the STIG frameworks, they have overlap. So if everyone's saying broadly the same thing, there's no need to be special or unique. I say to customers a lot of the time, your cybersecurity baseline, because that is what M365 tenant config is. It is not just configuring productivity software, it's security settings. It's not intellectual property. Configuring BitLocker as an MSP, it's not your IP. As long as your baseline is secure, it doesn't need to be unique, even if you're doing the same thing as the guy down the road. But sometimes what we see is companies try to make it their own special bespoke thing by different names or different policy types, and they don't want to share those with anyone. It's like, dude, you've turned on OneDrive. That's not intellectual property by any means. I'm not sure. And then what they sometimes say is, when we leave the client, we want to undo all of our configs. And that's, have you seen that before, Kelvin and
Yes,
Ben? In your experience?
it's especially by the smaller MSPs that take care of everything. You often get a message like, "Oh yeah, we want to remove our group policies and our Azure AD policies and our Intune policies," and we're like, "Why? Why are you going to inconvenience a client?" Like,
to add on that, Microsoft don't really want partners, and it says in the agreement, they don't want partners to make the tenant or the environment less secure than how they left it. So heads up to partners out there who are doing that, and just remember that the outcome is to make stuff secure. And the reason that you might be losing these customers is not because your config was bad. It might be because your marketing or your account management maybe wasn't up to scratch. And that's kind of how MSP wins and loses clients. I'd say it's all about the kind of people side of the business.
Interesting. Kelvin, Bo talks sometimes about, and again, I might be butchering his words, but when we come to, we have this fine line of shared responsibility with MDM, right? Mobile, like, oh, my clients, you can't touch my employees' mobile devices, but they sure as heck can access anything in M365. So one is, he talks a lot about how he oftentimes takes advantage of that in some conditional access policies, and to take advantage of those types of settings. What do we need to consider, knowing that a lot of times, probably more times than not, the customer doesn't want us monkeying around with the end users and mobile, but yet often wants full access to be able to do their job and work. And how do you balance that?
Number one is that MSPs have to start selling no, which is very difficult as an MSP, because convincing a client might be one of those tasks that truly requires. Okay, so a lot of MSPs are started by technicians. Let me start with that. And technicians are not always the best convincers. They're not salespeople, and because of that, they are often afraid to sell no to their clients. They're afraid to tell them this is insecure. You should not be doing this. One of the biggest things that I still see, our security department does a lot of penetration testing, and they start using password spray attacks, or they start trying to steal someone's token, and then they finally do steal a token, and they're like, okay, let's use it. And then they get logged by conditional access. But our engineers are very smart. All they do is they change their user agent to a mobile user agent, and most people only go like, yeah, Windows devices need to be MFA protected, mobile devices do not. And then they get in. It's ridiculous. It's one of the biggest things that happens in during our penetration testing services is like, yeah, conditional access configuration is, I don't want to say it's difficult, but it's you have to pay attention to your strategy to get it right. So
a tip on that as well is that just because the CA policy has a conditions box doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah.
So if it really is an all users, all cloud resources, and the grant condition is MFA, leave it at that, because that means any condition, if that user is accessing that cloud resource, they get in if they've got MFA. So I've seen that before, Kelvin, when you see the user agent bypass, where it means that somewhere down the line, someone's been a bit too specific in their policy when they probably didn't need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, and that is the biggest issue I see with MSPs, especially, and the being able to say no. There are ways to secure this correctly, and if you truly want to, if your client truly doesn't want complete device control, use something like mobile application management, where you have a bit more influence on what they're doing using M365 apps or specific apps that support mobile application management. You're not taking complete control of the device; you're taking control over the business apps that they're using, which is a different mentality and often something people are easier to accept. They go like, okay, when you log into this app, we enforce some extra security.
Right. Good, really good point. I was going to ask you this to you, Kelvin, but I'll go to Ben. Ben, are there certain, it's someone that monitors countless, devices. I don't know, you can, or I shouldn't say devices, accounts at this point.
Yep.
Is there certain noise that gets hidden, do you feel? And, you get to see, you get to put in best practices because you're doing the managed versus, people that are unmanaged, or, companies that are just getting onboarded, or even what you've seen, people that aren't using a tool. What's the fidelity? What noise gets lost that's often, a big telltale for you of different types of attacks and things like that?
I think monitoring user agents is important. That's one of the ones that we use quite frequently. And one event that that a lot of people ignore is the authentication failure events are interrupted. A lot of people don't understand that that's a part of the normal authentication flow. And so sometimes they overlook that when that's an actual successful sign-in. And sometimes that's the only event that you'll see during particular token attacks. But that and just honestly, monitoring the number of files people are downloading, what they're doing with them. If you're if all of a sudden, sharing files is normal, but all of a sudden it happens 500 times within like 15 minutes, that might be something that you want to pay attention to. Whereas most of the time that pretty much just goes ignored.
I was going to ask you to walk through a little bit of token hijacking. You spent a lot of time doing that.
I do.
But as you do leading into it, since we've had this P1 initiative, has there been any differences in terms of the number of hijackings you've seen?
I still it's still a pretty commonplace, because I don't think that there are enough people putting those conditional access policies in place or have the knowledge to do so. And that's one great thing about our software, Inforcer and CIPP, is that we try to make that process easy for them. Understanding what you're actually enabling. But one thing that we kind of noticed was, a lot of the times, when you're creating these conditional access policies to use, registered, or join devices, when you have people working from home, they don't want to do that. So when when we're performing a token theft and we're attacking these users, it's still easy to do because they don't have it, because it's like, I can't really enforce that because, they don't want me to register, my computer with Entra. And so what I came up with, I said, what? Everybody loves a free copy of Office. And typically that's really all that you really need is install that copy of Office, let it at least register, and that becomes a known device. And then you can roll it into that conditional access policy. You can enable that token protection.
That's a really good idea. Really, really cool. Do you guys?
You got 5 licenses.
Everyone loves free software. It's what we convince all of our users to do too. With Business Premium, you get 5 installs of Defender for Business. You get 5 installs of Office. So it's so easy to just convince them, like, hey, this is fantastic software. Just
it's a lot easier than trying to convince them to load that RMM agent.
Exactly, so much easier.
So, I still try and draw a kind of firm alignment with varying success on that, because if you've got this ultra secure perimeter and you've got your EDR and your monitoring, all these protections on the work company device, if you then allow a login from a non-company device, you've just done your own security game.
Yeah,
it just makes all the protections pointless.
Yeah, Lewis. So I think don't hold me to this exactly, but I think the latest is 39%, give or take, when we look at either the stats from CISA on Microsoft Enterprise using MFA, and for example, the SASE report, which is somewhere in the neighborhood, Ben, like probably 12, 15 million, very, very big data set now.
Yeah.
It's about 39% MFA adoption, a whopping 39%. Knowing we have things like, token hijacking just becoming ubiquitous, how do we start to migrate people even considering FIDO2? Is that something we should be trying to go down that path when we can't even get, 50% adoption of regular MFA? I guess I'd love your thoughts, and maybe yours after, Kelvin.
If somebody came to me and said, hey, we've done MFA to a point where everyone's using MS Authenticator, we've used Microsoft's registration campaign to get everybody off of SMS, and we've got no exclusions, and we've got legacy authentication blocked, and now we want passwordless and FIDO2. How do we get there? The first thing I would say to them is stop showing off.
Seriously, where do you find this customer?
You are so far ahead of absolutely everybody that I don't need to worry about you, and I need to go and spend my time talking to the people I need to convince that MFA should be turned on.
Yes.
For the CEO. But I mean, so let's talk about another weird default in Microsoft 365 is that if I have a tenant and I've registered with the Authenticator app, as an end user, I can just turn that on to passwordless, and then I get passwordless. Now, the weird thing about that config isn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember if this is the case, but the password doesn't go anywhere. It just is not used as the primary way in. And that's where that is different from Microsoft corporate accounts versus the consumer accounts, where on the consumer accounts, you can actually just get rid of the password entirely. Yeah. And when you put your username in, you're asked for a number and you just tap the number and you're in.
Yep.
But on enterprise and commercial tenants, the password's still there. You can reset it. You can do what you want to it. But the primary is just going to be put your email in, do the number matching MFA, you're logged in. And that's quite a nice user experience. And to be honest, if you're using Windows Hello on a laptop, how many people didn't know that actually counts as MFA anyway? It's a strong authentication because the laptop is 1, the PIN is 2. I'm in.
Right. Right. Good point. Kelvin, any further thoughts on this?
Well, next to that, Windows Hello is absolutely mind-blowingly amazing, and everyone should use it because it's phishing resistant and it's beautiful and it's awesome and it's all sorts of cool. I was surprised at how high the number is now compared to the previous years, but there's also been a really big push on Microsoft's side to get everyone over to multi-factor authentication, looking at the Microsoft portals, for example. And sometimes I get a little bit sad about our industry too, a little bit. I read the blogs by Microsoft about authentication a lot. They have the identity blogs, and they recently announced starting with phase 2 of MFA enforcement for Azure portals, which is when you use any of the administrator tools, so stuff like the Azure CLI, PowerShell, all these kind of things, they're enforcing MFA on that starting October 1st. The amount of administrators that are rebelling against that under that blog disappoints me. Because as security professionals, as system administrators, we should not be doing that, even if we think something is a bad idea, because it sets a precedence for everyone. Every other starting system administrator that reads this goes like, yeah, but this guy that I really appreciate and really is smart in IT said that MFA is bad. And he will start perpetrating that over and over, and it's like a disease, really.
The only thing I can think of as to why admins are complaining at this is because they're using a shared admin account, and it will be annoying.
Yes, that it is just the annoyance factor that they're complaining about, and sadly, that should not be an actual thing in security considerations.
So, Kelvin, one thing I wanted to ask you about was identity mismanagement. Like, where would you see the biggest areas? Is it service accounts? When we come to social engineering attacks, where would you see the biggest?
pure play social engineering attacks, the biggest thing that you see is OAuth hijacking, installing an app. Hunters has a good article about it. They call it the Rogue Apps article.
Yep.
They made a GitHub with all these public apps that are being abused constantly. Honestly, that is one of the most surprising things that I see system administrators, not just MSP, system administrators in general, not disable, because it is one of the easiest attack vectors. You just send someone an approval link for an app, they approve it, and boom, they have full access. They have a token that isn't assigned to a user, so good luck with your conditional access policies because they're going in as an enterprise app. And it just makes attacking so much easier. So social engineering, you see this a lot. You see, I think it's called eData or something like that, and EM client, like email
EM client,
clients.
Perfect Data.
Yeah.
You know, Perfect Data renamed
Perfect
their
Data.
client to mail_backup. So now it's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
That EM Kelvin, that EM attack was really incredible. How it you know,
Fast.
on one hand, it's like, oh, this is a great app because from one thing I can access all my email, but then they weaponized it brilliantly.
Yeah, they did, and they're using that so much because it has the ability to access email as an application. It makes it so easy. Like a system administrator could block an account and be like, "Okay, we're safe now," and then you're like, "Wait a minute, no, we're not. The attack is still ongoing." It's one of the biggest things that I see that people just allowing all apps regarding social engineering. It's the easiest way to get someone tricked.
And it's server to server, so it's so fast. So it's like they can exfiltrate that data in like seconds.
It's insane.
And it's like an entire SharePoint, OneDrive, email, everything's just like, oh, I have it now.
Yeah.
Lewis,
what about, go Lewis, you were saying.
Just briefly on that, we were talking about enterprise app consent. You can turn that off with one button.
One
button.
One little
one
click.
button is all it takes. You have to know which button, but
funnily enough, all of the settings that we're talking about here as misconfigurations or insecure default configurations, most of them can be changed from a single tab in the Azure portal.
Wow. Well, let's talk about sprawl for a minute. Lewis, Intra ID, Intra ID, and when you're dealing with large scale number of accounts, whether it's a Kelvin or some of the companies you deal with.
Yep.
How do you? What's your recommendation on this? We've the number of accounts. We have shadow IT, et cetera, et cetera. Any best practices and thoughts on the sprawl that you have to deal with as an MSP?
Even just putting a number on it makes it seem scary, because if we go back 20 minutes ago, security is the same for everyone. There's standards and there's checks and there's configurations we should be doing on every tenant. Sometimes you don't know what the impact of those buttons are going to be, and if you don't know, you can ask people in the communities, or you can perform a scream test. Go and delete that enterprise app that hasn't been used for a while and see who screams. Sometimes it might be nobody. Nice. And then you've done something that makes your tenant more secure. Same for sort of conditional access policies. There's reports, and there's a new-ish policy impact graph view to give you a visual indication of how often that user is getting hit by that policy. But yeah, the size of the tenant shouldn't make a difference. I mean, if you look at CIS benchmarks, they're going to recommend that you review things like public groups. So here's a fun one, actually. Whenever I join a company, what I do is I open up SharePoint, and in the top bar, I put a star and hit search, and then look at the number of sites I have access to. Because if I can do that, that's what Copilot can do for that user whenever they ask it a question. So go and give that one a go.
Very cool. Well, I know we're down to like 5 minutes, and I'm glad you mentioned Copilot. So Ben, let's start with you. Copilot now is the default UI for Microsoft when you go into M365, and it's kind of like I don't even know what I want to say here, other than we're enticing users, right, as Microsoft, and I get it. they're a for-profit business, but we haven't even gotten to policy. Where's our data? On and on and on. In most, as an MSP, most of our clients, yet this powerful, system is sitting in front of them.
Mhm.
How do we balance that? And what would you be doing today if you were back, director of security at your old MSP? What might you be recommending in something like that to your clients?
Permissions, least privilege. as what's one thing Copilot's going to do is it's going to make it really super easy for you to get into some knowledge that you're not necessarily supposed to have. So I think it really comes down to that. Just because you can share something doesn't mean it's maybe like such a great idea, especially sharing it with everyone. But yeah, just tightening that down. It comes down to really just even the basic things that you did before Microsoft. It's making sure those permissions are set on those folders and the SharePoint sites.
Got it. How about you, Kelvin? I mean, this is, this.
Copilot is a hard one for me.
Yeah.
There is a very hate relationship between me and Copilot. Copilot hates me and I hate it. One of the things that MSPs have to start worrying about for the future that is 100% going to be very AI driven is that you're no longer just going to be the IT guy. You need to start being the compliance guy as well.
Yep.
That's something that MSPs need to start preparing for. It's not just looking at, is this data able to be shared? No, it should be, is this data labeled correctly? Or is the metadata being used properly? Have I made secure boundaries around data that should be prohibited from everyone? It's no longer just permission management, it's full compliance management these days. And that's, MSPs have to prepare for that, because with AI, that's going to become more and more important.
Yeah, I mean, we as MSPs have struggled. We're talking about 39% MFA adoption, Kelvin, and yet we're trying to now start talking about, hey, is your data tagged properly, right? I mean, it's a
big step. It's a
Yeah.
big step, but it's one we'll have to take. IT has been commoditized over the years. A Gen Z entrepreneur does not go to an MSP for his IT services. He sets it up himself, and he goes to a guy that he knows for fixes. Or if his laptop is broken, do you know what a Gen Z entrepreneur does? He takes out his tablet and he throws his laptop away. They work in a very different way than what we're used to. So we have to start working in a different way from what we're used to be able to keep up with them.
Yeah. With a few minutes remaining, speaking of hate, Kelvin, can you talk to us a little bit about GDAP and, what can you leave us with? What should MSPs be thinking about to get a handle on it?
I'm interested in this one too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here we go. So, I've spoken so much about GDAP, and Microsoft has made mistakes there, and MSPs have not given enough input to make GDAP as manageable as it should be. But there are things to be aware of as an MSP. For the sake of brevity, because we only have a short amount of time, I'm going to name the things that Microsoft has come into our Discord to tell people, stop doing this. Number one is, don't believe you have to assign every single role to every single relationship. You don't need that much control. Number two is, they are working on creating global administrator relationships that only last for 90 days without auto-renew. Do you want to take that work on you? No. Stop doing it. Stop using global administrator in 99% of the cases. As an MSP, you don't need it. If you do need to create a global administrator in the tenant, give yourself privileged role administrator, which allows you to create a temporary admin. And that immediately brings me to my third point. Start working exclusively through GDAP, and when you can't do something through GDAP, use a form of just-in-time administration to get into the tenant. An administrator that you create specifically for a ticket, using PIM to elevate a role, using any form of just-in-time administration, even tools. There's so many tools that do just-in-time administration that help you with it. Use that instead of having a long-standing global administrator account with the same password at all your clients, because The amount of times that I see that, we recently did a client takeover from an MSP nearby, and we didn't need to ask for the M365 credentials. We guessed them.
Oh,
That bad. So stop doing that,
been
please.
there.
All right. I know we're at the top of the hour. Real quick, I'm going to put a URL in, starting with Lewis and going to Ben, back to you, Kelvin. So this is the Write a Boom agenda. If you loved what you heard today, Lewis, starting off with you, can you first thank you for coming on? Also, talk about your MD 102 session, just briefly. What can folks expect to see there at Write a Boom?
We're going to be doing a session to introduce people to Intune. There's going to be some cloud native management stuff in there. There's going to be some curriculum stuff in there. And then we're going to top it off with some real world stuff, because we know the exam is different to the actual world.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's going to be really focused through the lens of an MSP, not just the traditional go take the workshop and then the exam. So Ben, how about you guys with the first SaaS Alerts admin?
Yeah.
And I guess we'll get some purview into KSIM potentially.
Yeah, hopefully. I think so. But yeah, we're going to be basically taking them from A to Z in the platform. And like Lewis, we're going to throw some real life attacks and the way and say, hey, how would you defend against this? But basically just everything about it, from adding your first client all the way to using our API system.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're going to throw like real world attacks, tabletops, IOCs, real time. How would you go and handle this?
Yeah, security isn't just one of those things where you can just like set a rule and be like, this is my hacker rule, and that's all there is to it.
And Kelvin, how about
I wish
you?
it was that simple.
Yeah, right.
True.
Your first CIPP admin, talk to us.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely amazing. We're organizing it right now. It's going to be the first step of your CIPP credential that you can earn. We're also making sure that after the session, you get a voucher for either your MS 900 or AZ 900 exams if you haven't taken those yet, because
That's awesome.
it's really good to know these basics for everyone, even if you're an account manager or are an IT leader instead of a technician. It's really good to be able to cover those basics with that. So we're making sure that everyone walks away with a voucher and very in-depth knowledge about how CIPP does things, including an explanation on where you find the places to do it in the portal yourself. Because we can explain any product to you. It's super easy to explain a product to you. But if you don't have the knowledge of what you're actually changing, it's not going to be that useful to you. So we're going to really deep dive into the M365 portal in everything around it. It's going to be so much fun.
That's
Nice.
awesome. I can't wait. And even though many Write a Booms have been your birthday, we'll celebrate it early this year.
Yeah, we'll celebrate a little early this year.
All right. Well, first off, everybody that joined, thank you so much. Late on this Friday, Kelvin and Lewis, thanks a million. Staying up, I know it's not bedtime there over in Europe, but certainly later on a Friday. So enjoy your weekend. Really appreciate you guys coming on late. I really, Lewis, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, I mean, that's just a testament to how much Kelvin and I love Business Premium.
Exactly.
Friday night fun.
And then Ben, thanks a million. It was awesome having you, as always.
I appreciate it.
Wishing you all a fantastic weekend. Take care, everybody.
Have a good weekend. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.